the McCartney thing was great because it wasn't like, every one of these, if you go to a backstage or a meet and greet or something, they're all different. Some of them are just like slide in, take a picture, slide out.
Mm-hmm.
The McCartney thing was in 99, I think.
So
October 99.
McCartney was doing meet and greets. Like you can
No,
pay for a. So this
no.
was a press.
This was a
pass
totally different
tower.
animal. I got a call from Barbara Prismuth, who was, I think, the regional for Capitol at the time. And McCartney hadn't done anything for a whole year. Linda died, I think, in April of 98. And he was off the grid for a whole year. His year of mourning. This is before he went out with Heather Mills or any of that, before he married her or she was around. And when he decided to come out, he released an album called Run Devil Run, which was all 50s covers of songs he liked, a lot like John Lennon did for the rock and roll album. And Barbara invited me to go to the record release party in New York. It was at the Hammerstein Ballroom, I think it was, on 52nd Street in the shadow of MSG.
Wow.
And they had a radio station in New York had invited listeners, these listener winners, to be there to listen to, and they said McCartney will be there. And so he came out on the stage and he does a little song and dance and, talks about the making of the album. Dave Gilmour from Pink Floyd played guitar on it. I think Ian Pace, as I remember, was the drummer from Deep Purple on that album. And he did he's very entertaining. He's a very charming, affable, outgoing guy. And people were waving stuff for him to be signed. And he was like, no, I'm sorry. If I sign for you, I got to sign for everybody. And we don't have time for that. So then they played the album. And then he came out at the end and did a little wrap-up thing for the radio contest winners. And I was up in the VIP balcony, which is, like I am. But there were people up there who was interesting. Gilbert Gottfried was up there. May Pang was up there. Do you know her?
No.
She's the secretary that Lennon and Yoko had that John moved to L.A. with in 74, 75. He lived with her for a year and a half. She just had a movie come out, which is very, very, very good. So there was all these people up there, people like that, and so I was surprised. I didn't even know it was really going to happen. And Barbara come up to me and says, we're going back to Paul's hotel room. Would you like to go? And I went, let me think about it. Yeah. Okay. So we go back. This is where it turns into a Fellini movie. It's like the Four Seasons here in Boston. I was in the Stones hotel suite. These aren't rooms. These are suites. They have the whole floor. And you have to go and you have to have the right credentials to get in the elevator. And that elevator only goes to that floor, so people can't get off. There's no one else on that floor like there was, same thing in New York. It's like a private elevator, so they don't have like people just or fans are just trying to find them and wander around. So we go over to the hotel and we go up and get off at the floor, and I walk in, and literally as I'm walking off the elevator into the room, I bump into McCartney like this, and Barbara Prismuth exaggerates my credentials, which I don't like, but she said, "Oh, this is Rob Walsh. He's the East Coast regional for Tower Records." And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm a store manager. And McCartney just like grabbed me, gave me a hug, and just said, he goes, how you doing, Bob, like that. It was like really, real P.T. Barnum kind of,
believe it.
very friendly. I thought he didn't seem to have an ego. I mean, I've seen him when he's kind of a little egotistical in interviews and stuff, but he seemed like completely devoid. I would have it, tattooed on my forehead if I was him, but he seemed incredible. So we go in, and who's the first person after McCartney? I run into the room. Rudy Giuliani's there.
Wow.
He's mayor of New York, of course, in 1999, and he's there with his political posse. This is before people knew what they know about him today. This was pre 9/11, so he doesn't stay long. And then Woody Harrelson shows up with Lawrence Fishburne, and Judy Collins is there, and this is really a Fellini movie. Everybody is somebody except for me. I mean, I'm just like, what am I doing here? And so Giuliani and his posse leave. They've done their little hello. And immediately Woody breaks out this, I don't know, skunkweed, this like pot. And we're sitting in this room that's all white. It's like white walls, white shag rug, white leather couch. It looked like I was sitting on a cloud. I thought maybe I had died. I was a little nervous because I'm used to doing these things, but McCartney's a different animal, and I didn't know how to react. And I'm sitting right next to him. He's literally sitting on my right side like this, and Woody Harrelson's here, and Woody Harrelson is rolling these big fatties, and he's talking like, if you've seen Apocalypse Now, Dennis Hopper to Colonel Kurtz, Marlon Brando at the end, he's rambling because he's really stoned. I think him and Fishburne, it looked like they were already pretty well herbed up when they got there. And so he fires this up and he hands it to McCartney. And I don't really smoke that much pot anymore. Not since high school, but it's not like the stuff I had in high school. It smelled like a skunk went off in the room that sprayed. It was really pungent and just awful smelling. And McCartney takes this big, Woody Harrelson, McCartney takes this big drag. We know Paul likes it, he's been smoking his whole life. And then he passes it to me, and I'm such an idiot. I started to go, no thanks.
Oh my God, are you kidding me?
Just out of habit, and I hadn't really smoked since high school, didn't do it, and then I thought, well, what the heck? So I took a drag. I figured his saliva's on it or whatever. I took a drag, and it burned the fuck out of my throat. It was like it was
dry.
Oh my God! It just burned, and it was just like so. Oh, and I thought to myself, this is what he does to that wonderful voice. This is how he spoke, and no one seemed to notice this but me. Everyone else is like, oh, this is normal. This is like, and I'm just thinking pot didn't smell like this. It didn't burn, and it wasn't so harsh in my throat. Anyway, it was fun. I actually, besides that, little sidebar, in 1977, I was backstage with Tom Waits when he was touring on the Small Change record. He played UMass Amherst, and they did a show where there was an intermission, and he was backstage shooting down Jack Daniels out of the bottle, and so when he performed in the second place, in the second half of the show, he did a song called "The Piano Has Been Drinking," and honestly, he wasn't. The song is about a piano's drunk. Now, guy keeps hitting the wrong notes, but he's blaming it on the piano. The piano's drunk. But I think Tom was actually, method actor he was. He kind of, he was a bit tipsy himself because he actually sort of, I don't even ask, motioned at me, do you want some? So I took a hit out of, the bottle, and my roommate, who was also on the concert committee at UMass, he declined. He said, ugh. So, having a joint with McCartney and taking a hit of Jack Daniels from Tom Waits is probably, outside of my kids, of course, kids the best, birth of my kids, wedding day, probably two highlights.
Top 10, yeah.
Yeah, top two probably.
Yeah.
And I remember a roommate on the way back after the show. By the way, it was $2 to see Tom Waits. It was $3, $2 with a student ID. We are talking about 77. So my roommate says, ugh. He goes, how could you drink out of that bottle after him? He says, that guy looked like he had leprosy. And I said, that's partially an act. He dresses like a Skid Row sort of hipster / Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg. That's part of a show, but he looked all disheveled and like a really Skid Row Columbo, sort of Skid Row Columbo. I like that.
Yeah.
So I said what Tom would have said. I said, well, I figured the alcohol would kill any germs, that kind of thing. So back to McCartney. So McCartney is, I'm sitting there, I'm thinking to myself, don't do anything stupid. Don't say anything stupid. Don't say, oh God, remember when you were in the Beatles or anything stupid like that, like that great Chris Farley skit or whatever. So I finally said, oh, I thought this would be interesting. I didn't really think it through.
No.
And when I got his attention, I said, when he sit next to me, I said, by the way, my wife was going to come to this, but she she couldn't because we have twin boys at home who are 3.5, and no one wants to watch them, which I totally understand because they're like drunken midget Terminators. Yeah, nobody ever wanted to watch these two. So anyway, she said, she's very disappointed. So he says to me, really nice. He likes this. Oh, he goes, give him my love, won't you? And I said, not thinking it through all the way. No one had mentioned Linda. That was kind of the elephant in the room. My wife's name is Linda.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I thought I was going to get thrown out. So I said to him, well, the only reason I married her anyway is because her maiden name is Linda Mary. And he knew exactly what I was talking about because Linda was his wife who died of breast cancer the year before. And his mother, Mary, who's the mother he's talking about in Let It Be, of course, had died of breast cancer, I think, when he was like 16. Damn. So when I said I only married her jokingly because her name was Mother Mary, he had this look on his face, like this shock, and he just started to tear up. And I went, oh my God. I made Paul cry. I'm going to be beaten and thrown down the elevator shaft because everybody in the room was like, you don't bring up Linda. I mean, it was just understood that was, like I say, the elephant in the room. But he was very gracious. He said to me, he puts his hand on my knee and he says, he goes, don't go there. He says, you're going to get me all weepy. And I was like, it was like this Pinocchio moment. It was sort of like, instead of Wood, he was a real boy. He's not this icon, Paul. This is a real human moment. It's sort of like he really is a real boy.
He's one of us.
Yeah, he's one of us.
Yeah.
It's like that's why I say Pinocchio moment. It was like, oh my God, it was so touching.
Wow.
And he was like, but I did think about it on the way back. When I went to my hotel, I stayed over that night. When I went back, did I stay over? I can't remember if I did. But then when I left,
stayed over at Paul's place.
No. God, no. This was what I say was odd. Is instead of just a meet and greet, I was there for a couple of hours. There's a picture up there too. You saw it with the Paul. You saw it, didn't you?
Yeah.
It's up there.
Oh yeah.
But from that
I'm looking
night,
at it right now.
From that night. But it was, you got to actually hang out with him and talk and just get to.
What a good story.
We talked about other stuff too. It was great. It was so funny. There was a point where I had actually brought two 45s, picture sleeves for him to sign. And he signed one of them, and I said, could you sign the other one? And he looks at me, he goes, there's a market for this sort of thing. And I went, well, I'm not, he goes, mustn't be greedy, Rob. And it was so funny when he goes, mustn't, I'll never forget that either. And this was before eBay. So he signed the one, and then the other one, I said, well, the only reason I had two is because I have two boys. I have twins, and I was going to give one to each of them. And he says, no, I'm only doing one per person, which was fine. But the one that I gave him was really rare. It was something he'd never seen before. So I thought for a moment there he was actually going to ask me for it. It's for something that he did in 1966. He did the theme song for a movie called The Family Way. And it was a 45 that had never been sold commercially. It was just sent to radio. It was a white label promo. And on it said, attention, radio programmers, this is a Paul McCartney song. Please play. It's the first thing anyone Beatle had done outside of the Beatles in 1966. Wow. The reason he'd never seen it, because the band who recorded it wasn't him. It was a band called the Brass Ring or something, and it was on a different record label in Capitol. It was on Dunhill. So not surprising, he had never seen one, but I thought he was going to ask me for it. It seemed like there for a moment.
How do you react?
When he said, he was looking at it, he goes, what's this? And he says, I know what it is. He says, but I've never seen this before. And I said, when I told him, I thought for sure he was going to go, can I have? I was like, oh, geez. Well, at least I had the other thing to sign. But anyway, you
still own this.
He was lovely, of course.
Like the Paul McCartney signed.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Well, we might as well if you're there, and if you're a big Beatles fan. It was like it's a remembrance of that night.